All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. With me today, I have Paul Wright. Paul is the head of media and technology at Gilroy. Um, Over 20 years of experience in the B2B marketing and media and tech spaces, um, with also some background in the finance from the finance world, which we're going to be discussing. But all that and more later. Super excited and happy to be speaking to you today, Paul. Thanks so much for joining me.
No, thanks, Evershaw. I really appreciate it, and good to catch up. So,
Awesome, awesome, good stuff. So let's dive right to it. Maybe before we talk more about the topic of demonstrating GTM ROI, which is really kind of the main reason that wanted to speak with you. Maybe you can give us a quick background to your experience that also helped shape maybe your approach into evaluating GTM ROI.
yeah, of course. My background started as finance. I started off in finance with a number of years working as finance analyst for big PLCs, through to then working with smaller organizations as their accountant, and moving up to head of finance. Um, that sort of gave us the background around data, and so understanding data and understanding analytics, and that helped us just progress to. I'm going to start again. Sorry, Avishai. I'm hoping
No worries, it's all good.
I'm not good at these. This is where it's like that shining light. But yeah. So my background is in finance. I took sort of the data side of things and really enjoyed the data and supported marketing agency that I was working for at the time and used that data to help them understand performance of campaigns. And that sort of evolved a lot more to the point of where we could actually start predicting a lot of performance campaigns and providing forecasts for our clients based off of past performance, but also what trends were happening in the marketplace at the time. And obviously, there were new tools and new technologies that were coming out, and we were taking advantage of those to sort of help shape our clients' campaigns and sort of accelerate performance beyond what they were receiving. And over a period of time, sorry, after you.
No, it's all good. I'm just saying that this might have, I would imagine, giving you a substantial edge in terms of that financial understanding or a financial lens to put in a marketing perspective. And again, marketers come from a lot of different disciplines, but I think a big challenge of them, or sometimes a hesitation, is when it comes to the financial lens, the revenue lens. So starting to kind of speak in that language, that's something that you were pretty much natural, right? You came from that space, so you were actually using that to demonstrate and guide the decisions rather than kind of shy away from that.
Yeah, and also just trying to understand where there are gaps in that data journey as well, and trying to articulate that to different stakeholders within the business, from your C-suite and the board, through to investors, through to internal stakeholders as well, such as campaign managers. So it's taking that data and understanding your knowns and your unknowns, and also looking at how you can make correlations between different data to be able to tell a story. So, and then obviously, we were then able to take that data and then actually translate it into dashboards that become a bit more real time, that sort of gave that data to all different stakeholders within the organization, and subsequently our clients as well.
And so we're in an era of rapid transformation. This is a topic that I've been discussing with a lot of different leaders. And this transformation is in part due to the explosion of data, explosion of solutions, and a challenge that may have been in the past, a secondary challenge of contextualizing data. So you may have only a certain set of activities or channels. So that challenge wasn't a great. Today, if you're not able to contextualize huge amounts of data, you're just going to be completely blind. And it's also about a question of understanding which data do I take in, do I consider? So the skill, right, of integrating data, of understanding, of being data literate today is not just a plus. It is really a fundamental requirement of operating in this in the GTM space. And I think what you're describing is really the fact that we're at that level of complexity that if we're not thinking about how to approach ingesting and operationalizing these amounts of data, it's going to be very hard to understand where we are, where our company is at, where our GTM is. Do you see that as well in terms of the trends and in terms of kind of, for the past, we talked about 20 years also. Both of us, I think, have been seeing a lot of transitions in this space. So what are the things that you've been seeing kind of for the past years that would indicate that transformation for you and how to approach it?
I think I think you touched on incorporating a lot more different skill sets and people from different backgrounds. Marketers that have come up, they can typically be on the creative side, but also you've got data orientated people. And I think just sort of trying to fuse those and create dynamic teams between them, I think is really powerful and important in today's environment because you need context behind the data. Data is just data. If you don't have what's happening and why that's happening as part of a journey, and obviously, I know Trend Demon has the ability to be able to take that data and contextualize it in customer journeys. That's really powerful, both from a marketer and also from data scientists and sort of senior stakeholders in the organization.
So from what I hear, one I think takeaway is really think of the diversity of the team that you're going to have because you're going to have to need those mixture of skill sets of data literacy with creative capabilities, with contextualization, maybe with strategic. So it's really going to be about that mixture. And that topic of mixture is something that we're going to be discussing on later in the talk about we are living in a very mixed world. There's a lot of different influences. There's a lot of different moving pieces, as opposed to kind of a more atomic world. Everything is kind of very clear and divided. In the past, right? We talked about this before. We had marketing, that was one thing, and then you had sales, that was another thing. Today we have GTM. It's a big mix of things, right? It's a lot of things, lots of activities that are going. And on the topic, kind of the main theme that I wanted to discuss is how to demonstrate GTM ROI, how to show if it's the leadership, if it's internally, if it's externally, how to show what we're doing under this umbrella of GTM is really impacting outcomes. That's been a major challenge for a lot of marketers, and it's increasing in its complexity. So, how are you approaching this, or what are the challenges that you're seeing in demonstrating GTM ROI, and then kind of what would be your approaches to mitigating that?
Yeah, I think so. One of the big challenges is obviously the introduction of GDPR over the last several years, and obviously people opting into being tracked has sometimes limited our ability to see the full picture. And so we take a sort of a hybrid mix of proving ROI, whether that's from attribution within various different platforms and technologies, through to what we find really successful is incremental lift. So actually, what did we do new? And did we see impact against these certain KPIs at these different stages of the journey and from marketing through to sales? And what is that time lag? And being able to sort of use a hybrid mix of attribution, which gives you sort of granularity at an individual platform level. Incremental lift really reinforces the GTM motion, which is what we're trying to do is grow an organization's accelerate their growth. And so using incremental lift allows you to sort of decouple credit across different teams, but actually look at did it have a material impact in growth for an organization. So we use those two different models. You do have media mix modeling as well. So if you're doing a lot of volume and a lot of demand gen, It works very well from a B2C perspective, but it can be deployed within B2B world, done rightly, and also if you've got the volume and the scale. So we use sort of like I say, a hybrid mix of different measurement solutions to prove value.
So maybe you can give a short example, because one of the things that we discussed is also really the difference between B2C approaches to B2B. And kind of a lot of times B2B companies are inheriting approaches and tools from B2C that aren't really a good fit for them. I think attribution in its classic sense is a good example. It's something that was really made for e-commerce, for very quick and easy decisions and spends, not for long buyer journeys, not for buying groups, not for a B2B scenario. And they have their shortcomings. That's why there's such a struggle to demonstrate that. And you mentioned incrementality, which is something that I also think is really a more a clearer way or more effective way to demonstrate differences in performance, which is what we're actually trying to do. When you break down what are we trying to prove, we're trying to prove that one effort outperformed another effort or another channel or another piece of asset or another activity, and that's why we should invest in it more. But maybe give me a quick example of incrementality and kind of day to day, and what and how you would see it and how would use it.
Yeah, so we work with a client as a B2C arm and also a B2B arm, and they were still trying to prove the same approach from B2C into B2B, and so we took this incremental lift approach with our client. They had a lot of tracking issues, so we were still using attribution, but they were still struggling to sort of see the true impact that was being delivered against B2B. So we we were able to show a lift of around 2.5% increase, 2.5x increase in registrations, so custom signups that they were looking for. But that then actually then had a material impact of about 3.5x in terms of them becoming lifetime customers as well. So by being able to prove the value of we activated this particular marketing campaign in this particular region, they thought it was organic growth. It wasn't organic growth because you weren't doing anything else. We activated this campaign. It's then had this incremental lift in terms of sign-ups and customer retention as well, activation. So that by taking that approach, it just allows us to prove back to the business that marketing did have a material impact.
So if I compare it to kind of classic attribution, I hear two key differences. One is kind of opening up a lens to a much wider aspect. So looking at events that happen much further down the line than just kind of, did it get the sign up that I want? And I think also in B2B, just to open kind of you know, parentheses, as we're transitioning from lead based to account based, as we're transitioning from trying to capture leads to capturing attention and growing lifetime value, we realize we need to be looking at other KPIs and other metrics that are kind of much longer term than just, did this landing page convert X amount of leads? So that's one difference that I'm spotting. The other one is kind of realizing that the world is complex. Those activities are going to be with multiple activities in them. Just singling out one and saying, just one thing has impacted is going to be difficult. You need to look at that mixture of capabilities in context. So how did this group perform versus another group of activities, and what were the differences? And then realize that it's not, okay, so we just have one channel, so everything goes into that one channel, right? That doesn't work. You're not going to be able to achieve those outcomes. So it's that combination of a wider lens and a comparative approach of a mixture of activities to then be able to say this group outperforms that. That's why we are doubling down on it. And then my follow-up question is, did you see, so the question is from correlation to causality, right? Was there's just a correlation between those activities to outcomes, or are we able to prove that when we're continuing to do, we are continuing to see that? Is that something that you've managed to see as well?
We did, and a part of that incrementality test, sometimes you do have queries or concerns around did that have a material impact. So there are times where we pause that activity to see a decrease. And so that can be your proof validation. It's not always the best approach because obviously it will impact your growth and your trajectory. You want to try to capitalize on it, but sometimes you do need to prove it um, uh, with concrete data. I think that's where also attribution then kicks in as well, because it becomes more of a validator as well against specific tactics. So you're looking at incremental lift as an organization, and then using attribution for sort of validation points against specific tactics or channels or content that's actually resonating with your audience.
Mm.
But we also took an ABM approach as well. So
Okay.
historically, this client was very much a demand gen, casting it wide. As part of our strategy, we took an insight, customer insight led approach. So we analyzed their existing customers. We understood who their top performing customers were. We then looked at actually where their locations were as well. So we highlighted key cities where their customers were based, and then went and acquired all the companies and built a target account list for all of those different cities, and then activated our media campaign to that specific locations. And then we were able to then cross-reference through attribution, direct attribution of the accounts that we were specifically targeting in our media campaigns to those that actually signed up. And the rest of the region was our control group.
Control. Got it.
So we
Amazing.
were able to test between
Uh-huh.
what we were activating in specific hyper-localized regions against a specific target account list versus the control group. So again, that just gives us the ability to be able to go, here's the direct attribution. These are the specific accounts that have signed up. Here's the incremental lift this is having back to the business. And so you start to build up a concrete evidence of all these different areas to be able to build out a holistic picture that the business can then go back and get further investment.
So if I'm kind of just trying to visualize it, you're saying we have incrementality as the major methodology that I will demonstrate, and it will have different elements or components that will help with the execution. So we're going to be using attribution in certain parts of it. And ABM could be a type of motion that we're testing against, but they're going to be the building parts of that. But then we're going to go to the CFO. I'm going to have that conversation that says, look, we want to double down on this versus that. That is going to be the story that we're going to tell. In a sense, this motion, this activity, this mixture of channels, elements, content has outperformed that from an incrementality perspective. And again, this is why we want to do more of this or do more of that. And again, if you want, we can stop and show you that, if we just continue to doing what we did, we're gonna we're gonna get down. Is it those conversations that were happening?
It is, yeah. And obviously, you're looking at what did the business generate as a total revenue stream. And this was the influence of the activity that we had against it. So being able to prove it in lots of different ways just makes
Amazing.
makes that case easier.
Now you're very well versed in the media space, media buying, and media technologies, which is also, you mentioned GDPR. We're also going through very rapid transformations. We're talking about GDPR. We're talking about third-party deprecation. We're talking about a lot of different challenges arising from third-party data and the necessity to move to first-party. So maybe under that context, what are the transitions or transformations you're seeing in the media landscape, especially in B2B? Also, where are the opportunities that you see? We're getting into 25 now. What would you recommend kind of from media leadership to pay attention to take note, and how are you looking at the whole space? It's a pretty wide
Yeah,
question,
well,
I know, but we'll start to unpack it a bit.
So first party data is absolutely critical. It's understanding who your ICP is, it's understanding who your target audience is, who's actually resonating. It's also just looking at who supports the wider buying committee, because often when we're briefed, it's we want to be going after C-suite, we want to be going after senior stakeholders, but actually when we interrogate the data of our customers, we're actually able to unpack who's influencing the buying stage, how many specific key individuals or stakeholders that we need to be engaging with within the organizations, because we know that multi-threading is so important nowadays for the sales team. If we know that we've only acquired three contacts, but they need typically on average seven contacts within the buying committee, then we know as from a media, right, we need to be doubling down and engaging all these different stakeholders within our media campaign. So that just gets us better targeting and also much more focused and efficient with our budget. So understanding your first party data is really important, from industries to buyer journeys. I think that's where we love working with Trend Demon. We're able to actually look at the different content that resonates with those different audiences, as well as what works at different stages of that journey as well. So when we're building out our media campaigns, we're isolating the right content at each of those stages within those key accounts, within those key stakeholders, and removing subjectivity out of it, because we're in marketing, we love subjectivity. And somebody may spend a long time creating an asset. It may not necessarily live within the awareness stage. It could actually be in that decision purchase stage as the validation piece. So we use Trendemon to sort of uncover those insights around our audience and around the content that they prefer engaging with, and that just helps our media campaigns be much more efficient.
And I think in one of those transitions is we also talk about right about anonymity, the challenge of people disclosing personal information, right? Because they know they're going to be now subjected to endless approaches. And so that creates a challenge, but an opportunity of kind of shifting from a lead-based approach to an account-based approach. So looking at the target accounts, you mentioned the buying group. I think that's going to be probably one of the challenges for 25, how to uncover the buying group without forcing them to disclose or to de-anonymize themselves, which people, will not do. I think that's going to be a big challenge there. But going back in terms of media and media platforms and all of that, are you seeing an impact with those transitions of privacy, of third party, of anonymity? Are you seeing that impacting B2B go to market from a media perspective? And in addition to building first party data, what would your recommendations be to addressing some of those gaps and challenges?
Well, if we look at the answer the second question, so the CDPs are really important. Also, but then looking at sort of so within the B2B space, more and more organizations are using ABM platforms. The likes of Six Sense, Demandbase, Rollworks, the various solutions out there. So it's just taking advantage, like you say, at the buying group, and just making sure that we engage a wider stakeholder audience within those accounts that are going to turn into business for us and that are going to have material impact for our client success. In terms of channels, I think it's still bridging between the hyper targeted to still leveraging brand. Brand is really important. We see when we deploy brand, performance campaigns actually a lot cheaper. So overall, the ROI from your media campaigns is much stronger if you have a broad mix from brand through to performance, and just making sure you get that balance right. Because if you're focusing on performance campaigns all the time, it actually becomes much more costly than if you have a hybrid mix. So that's something
And
that I would
we have
recommend to
incrementality to prove it, right?
prove it. Yeah, exactly. And that's the benefit of using incrementality is you're able to sort of show these are the accounts that we're going after. We've actually run brand campaigns rather than go national and go hyper local, and we've been able to prove pipeline and close one revenue from brand activity using various technologies because we've been hyper local against a specific account list versus the rest of the control group, which is the rest of the country or the region. So we can still prove brand performance into performance marketing into actual commercial outcomes as well, such as revenue and pipeline.
Which is one of the, toughest conversations to have with financial leaders, the CFOs, about why do we need to invest in brand. I remember there was, when we talked about this before, we talked about the fact that there are going to be certain aspects of GTM you're not going to be able to directly connect or correlate. We're going to have to realize some of those gaps. But to the point of focus, and you mentioned kind of this in these two examples, this need to go localized, go deep, go very, very targeted, in an era, in a period where we're all competing for attention. That resource is so scarce that if we dilute or if we try to spread that investment, that resource, even if you're a big company, even if you're a very large scale enterprise, your ability to capture attention, over time, and to continuously capture attention over a large group of people is going to be non-existent. Probably the only way, as you mentioned, is going to be very targeted geographically, industry wise. So to have a very clear sense of who I'm going to go after, in a way to address that very drastic decline in our attention, right? As humans, we're continuously just putting more and more gates to get information flowing. So I think that's a very important takeaway that I would look at, and again, from that administration. So we talked about some examples. If there are some other examples that you want to share of activities you've done in Gilroy, you've done and other companies that you've seen, that you came in, you saw that challenge and opportunity, looked at that approach through incrementality, took action, and then really see that as translate as now to become probably the leading strategy, right? After you've demonstrated for a certain time, it's probably going to be the main approach. So yeah, what are some examples that you've had recently?
Yeah, there's been a client of ours that has had the challenge of proving, touching on sort of the brand element through to performance. So we analyzed their first party data, so understood who all their customers were from their target addressable market through to who their actual ICP was, through to who were actually there, who were buying becoming actual customers, and who were losing and not becoming customers. And so we analyzed all that data. We're able to isolate specific regions within a specific ICP in multiple countries and run brand campaigns hyper localized in those specific areas against the now defined target account list against those accounts, and then measure who actually became pipeline, who became a customer, who won revenue, and using the rest of the region as a control group to be able to compare the activity that we were doing from brand and also within performance to this is the actual uplift. So that campaign was incredibly successful in delivering increased revenue versus the rest of the territories where they weren't running brand activity. So that then just gave them the ability to go, okay, well, his brand, it works. How can we now scale that to different regions? So it doesn't always have to be hyper targeted forever. What it can do is just give you the foundations and the proof points back to the C-suite, to the CFO, to unlock additional budget because you've been able to prove it in a methodical way and then allow you to then move into different territories. And so you can then keep that revenue growth in those different territories through brand and performance marketing to then continue to scale the business. Once you've invested in brand in a particular area, it takes a while for it to decrease. So it does allow you to then start moving in different territories rather than going big but too thin, and having very little impact. And that's sort of the challenge B2B has had over these years. So it's just taking a more methodical approach to running high targeted campaigns.
And in terms of the content, because you're talking about localization, if I understand, and personalization as kind of the drivers,
Mm,
and saying, okay, we need to be contextual. We cannot just send everything to the same group.
yeah.
But what was the change? And maybe for smaller companies listening and thinking, okay, this is a very big investment, what would you recommend would be kind of the biggest needle movers in that type of approach if they do want to adopt that type of motion?
It's actually scalable. We've run it with big FTSE 100 and Nasdaq PLCs through to micro businesses that are looking to scale in their local region. It's the same approach, because it's the framework that helps you scale. So it doesn't matter the size of your organizations. The role behind this is actually budget efficiencies. Even with large enterprise organizations, they don't have endless budgets. They need to work smarter. And so this is just taking that smart approach to budget management, to delivering tangible results, to delivering revenue that helps you unlock additional budget, the CFO, to then continue to scale the business. So it works at every single size of organization, and that's something that we like to do. But it's the insights that you have to uncover within in your business, understand your customers, understand those trigger points, and then understand what content is resonating with your audience to deliver that personalization. So what are the challenges that they're encountering? So you can actually speak to them uh, in a more conversational way, in a personalized way.
Amazing. Amazing. Perfect. I think could have asked for a better closing note on that. And I think really giving us a very clear path forward in a very complex and convoluted environment of really understanding, again, who you're speaking with, what language are they speaking, what are they interested in, and kind of, again, behind the data, you have people, right? You have actual humans engaging. Well, so far, until we have AIs also reading our content for us. But until that happens, you're trying to connect with other humans, influence kind of what they're thinking about, how they should be approached. And as opposed to just kind of taking a mass scale approach, a numbers game, right? It's more getting back to being human, to understanding, okay, these are the group of people I need to influence, especially in B2B. It's really is about whether I hit the right spots rather than do I have enough ammunition to, to go out there. So yeah, I think spot on there. Yeah, so I wanted to thank you taking the time speaking with me. I think it's been a pleasure. And look forward to continuing to work together. And good luck in the on the next adventure that you're taking.
Thanks,
um,
Avishai. Really appreciate it.
awesome,
That's
awesome.
thank you.
All right, cheers.